Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. You see the drippy, I'm fitted up. Hop in my car and the giddy up. Secure the bag, yeah, I get the bus. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. You see the drippy, I'm fitted up. Hop in my car and the giddy up. Secure the bag, yeah, I get the bus. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. Ooh, I've been on the flex since flex on. Neighborhood all in your eardrums. I ain't never scared like Bone Crush. Boy, I got God, don't fear none. My line busy, take no calls. Feels like I don't have no flaws. Snakes in the grass, cut those off. Yo, squad shitty, my bros raw. No breaks, we go, 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 go. Throw shade, that's a no, 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 no. Go high, go low, low, low. Like spinning in a 644. Cash money like 504. Ball like AD24. No sleep, need more, more, more. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. You see the drippy, I'm fitted up. Hop in my car and the giddy up. Secure the bag, yeah, I get the bus. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. You see the drippy, I'm fitted up. Hop in my car and the giddy up. Secure the bag, yeah, I get the bus. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. Ooh, I'm a real one, my day ones. Try to speak up, can't say none. Try to dig dirt, there ain't none. I make the money that save up. 10 to 80, my save ones. Take to the top on the base one. New car, race on. Fast lane, pace on. With the booyah, that's a flex. Not human, I am from another planet. I'ma teleport my advantage. I'ma wake up, do damage.
Welcome in, everyone.
Video, huh?
Yeah.
Does
Does that get you ready? Yeah. I mean, I know the
dude.
band felt traditional. It was something that, we all could get ready for. But at the end of the day, seeing those players get hyped and excited for when they're making plays, it just takes it to another level, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, that was awesome. Well done.
So welcome to CCF. How's everyone doing there after week 1 of football? Let's just get some. First of all, I'm John Cronenberg at John K NFL. Next to me, we have Tony Casola of Lots of Boba Fett. And underneath, we have Rick Baum at Falcon 8 Fan. So how are you guys doing? How was week 1 for you in general? Just let me know what were your first initial thoughts.
It was awesome to have college football back. Let's start there. And, of course, we could start off our college football Saturdays with a beautiful, exciting offensive explosion by our Colorado Buffaloes. I know I talked about last week. We needed to see more points get thrown out there. I'd say 45 points is a good start. What do you think, Rick?
Man, I was impressed with CU. It's funny. I was down on the field after our game against Robert Morris, and that's all the guys were talking about. They're like, Sanders had 510 yards, and we have almost 20 Texas players on this Air Force roster, and our last game was at TCU Stadium, and to see Colorado, who we beat badly last year, I mean, they were a different team, and they looked amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome to see.
Yeah,
it's funny. I had talked with Jake Schwanitz of DNVR, and we specifically referenced that Air Force game because we were walking out of the tunnel together. Season. That was September 10th of last year. So what a year this has been. And to go from there to here.
Oh, yeah. And, besides that, there were some other games that I was interested in. I did like, North Carolina versus South Carolina. Kind of was expecting North Carolina to have a little bit more efficient of a passing game, just kind of going around the league a little bit. And those were some of the games I was surprised by. Were you guys surprised at all with LSU kind of losing to FSU? I mean, that's something very close to a lot of Colorado fans right now, as it seems to be there's a rivalry going on in a sense, even though they don't play.
Right. Yeah, I think it was more honestly kind of shocking of how flat LSU looked in that second half, because they had a 3-point lead. I thought it'd be a very close game. I think LSU was maybe favored by 2 points, somewhere around there. I thought it'd be a very close game. To see them kind of get run out of the building in the second half it was shocking to me.
Yeah, it really was. I wasn't expecting that kind of jump from FSU out of the gate. I was expecting a little bit more of a close game, honestly, with LSU. What about yourself, Rick? Were you keeping an eye on that game?
Well, that game was surprising. If you're an LSU fan, I wasn't as surprised. I think the game that got me was a couple years ago we were playing in Annapolis for the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and I got there early, and I was in North Carolina. Of course, I wanted to check out, NC State, North Carolina, and Duke. And when we showed up there, I got to see the Duke football team practicing. And I thought, man, this is a talented team that you don't hear a lot about. And then a couple years later, this last weekend, going in to Clemson and actually coming to Duke, they handled their business, and it was good to see.
Yeah.
How out of sorts did Clemson look? Like,
Bad.
if you're DJ Uiagalelei, I bet you're just smiling up there in Corvallis.
Oh, because everyone was blaming him last year. I mean, that was just the truth. And, after seeing this kind of performance, I don't recall any, big transfer outs, anything kind of to that regard. So this felt like this is the way of trajectory for Clemson. And that is surprising that they've kind of taken that that dive.
Well, we talk about, Colorado was a 20-point underdog. You guys know they weren't the biggest underdog to win of the weekend. No. Yeah. Texas State was 27.5-point underdogs to Baylor and went into Waco and beat them. That's insane to me.
And Texas State had a huge kind of similar kind of thing that Colorado did is they brought a lot of transfers. They had a new coach that many people didn't believe in for X, Y, and Z reasons. And being able to show that you can be able to be productive if you get in these transferred kids and coach them well and get them to be a unit.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, that's just kind of the beginning of things to come. Why don't we go ahead and move on over to the Colorado side? Dive into that. Let's go ahead and do that.
You earned it.
What we talk about, that was a fun game because you finally got to see some offense from our Colorado Buffaloes. I referenced it last week when we all spoke. Only been a handful of games in the last 5 years where we scored at least 30. Well, 45 will do you. 45 will do good. And we have a true potential first-round quarterback in Shedeur Sanders. I've been saying it for a long time. This kid has ability. Again, a lot of people looked at that Sanders and said, it's just his dad. We had the whole Hawkins thing going here. Are we going to have another Hawkins? We're nowhere close. This kid is a legit NFL prospect. He tore up the FCS for a reason. He's going to continue to tear up the FBS for that same reason. He's got the poise. He's got the pocket awareness, and he definitely has the arm talent to succeed.
Yeah, it was something very impressive to see. Not only that is, he took advantage of the situation. I think he was 14 of 16 off of play action. It shows how valuable CU was able to, even though they didn't run the ball too often, they were using the passing game as an extension of the run game in many ways. Those kind of things that they were using to really maximize this team's performance. And it was, again, that's one thing I really like to see is, hey, even though it wasn't as much of a ground and pound kind of game, they still were taking those kind of, running-esque plays and being able to be productive there. So for me, CU also had a variety of different play styles, and they controlled the clock, especially with trying to be, that Sean Lewis kind of speed offense. It was very impressive, especially for the clock.
Well, yeah, and you look at it, and they referenced it a few times on the broadcast that he had worked out and done some off-season work with Tom Brady. And if Tom Brady shredding you with little 5-6 yard passes almost every down is not something that you immediately think of when you think of the Patriots' old offense, I mean, that's what it looked like to me. You're just absolutely taking what the defense is giving you. They're going to give you a 5-yard curl, 40 times. We're going to hit that 5-yard curl 40 times. What did you think, Rick? I mean, to me, you look like a guy that would love Tom Brady. So was it Tom Brady-esque to you?
Oh, yeah. It was, it was funny because Shedeur, the first thing he said at the press conference was, guess who called me yesterday? And I'll tell you, he must have given him a game plan. I was like, welcome to Boulder, Travis Hunter. Holy cow. If you're an offensive player, he's got your receptions. If you're a defensive player, he's got your diving picks. your sticks. I'm excited for this team, man.
Yeah, that defensive interception, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but that defensive interception is one of the most impressive plays I've ever seen out of a defensive player watching football. Because if you notice, it's the exact same route concept that CU scored their first touchdown. If two wide receivers split out, they both run the slant, draw everyone inside, running back leaks out behind him. If you notice, his responsibility is supposed to be the outside receiver. And he just completely disregarded him because he knew where the ball was going. That's, to me, just pure instinct.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a little bit of a trivia piece here. So Charles Woodson, I believe, the year that he won the Heisman, okay, he had 22 receptions that entire season when he won for playing both ways. Travis had 11 in week 1.
That's amazing. And again, I was trying for, the Colorado kind of fan base thinking, I was trying to think of Champ Bailey when he had kind of 800 yards as a Georgia player, as well as, playing on defense, being selected very high. Those guys that can do it, very special, but I don't recall any of those guys. I think it was 100 and almost 26, 100, almost 30 snaps around there for Hunter. I don't recall those guys doing those kind of numbers. It's much different when he was in there. It felt like consistently versus the other guys where it felt like, hey, it's every once in a while when we feel we can get you in a matchup. This felt like, hey, you're a special receiver. You're a special corner. We're going to worry a little bit more about having you on the defense, but at the same time, we just can't leave you off the field.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I got it a little bit. If you guys are wrestling fans, I kept seeing the snap counts raise every couple of days. So it was kind of like Goldberg's undefeated streak when he first came into WCW. But, it went from 110 to 120 to 140. I mean, to me, it looked like he never went off the field. So, I could easily buy into any number that they were going to throw out there. If you would have told me he would have played 170 out of 160 snaps, I would have believed you. Because it looked like he was everywhere. It was unreal. I could not believe that he was actually doing what he was doing. And I even told my brother at one point, if you notice, when he's sitting there getting the play or waiting for the offense to come out, he's still breathing through his nose. He's not even tired. In the second half, he's still breathing through his nose. Normally, as you see, getting those deep breaths, he's still, I'm good. It was unreal to watch.
Yeah, no, I definitely, now that you speak of it, yeah, he didn't seem to be having that huff and puff kind of thing going on. The only time he came out really, it felt like, was after reception, and maybe he needed to get something, tie a shoe or something like that. It felt very small, the reasons why he came out versus, hey, we have to get you out there just to get you a breather. That didn't seem like an issue at all. And on top of that, there were so many other receivers that have so much potential that, again, that shows what kind of player he brings, again, over some of those guys that really are special.
Yeah. I think it was the first time in school history where we had 4 guys over 100 yards in a single game.
Would not doubt that. No. And what were your thoughts in terms of the running game, though? Let me ask you that, Tony. Again, I felt like there was an extension of it through the passing game. Did you have that same kind of perception, or is that more of their traditional kind of outlet?
Yeah, I think I need to see some improvement out of the running game, to be honest with you. Again, just kind of seeing the offensive line. I think they actually held up pretty well in the passing game. Yes, I think he was sacked 4 times, if I remember right. But if you look, there just wasn't that consistent push up front in the running game. I would like to see it get a little more consistent, because I think if you take out sack yardage, college is always a little weird because they add sack yardage to your rushing totals. So if you actually look at it, it'd be more around 30 carries for around 80-something yards, which needs to be better. If you're getting 30 carries in a college game, I think you need to be more around 120 to 150 yards rushing. When we talk about Air Force, that'd be a first quarter or something. But, with a team like Colorado, you definitely need to offset that passing game with the running game, and I'd like to see a little more consistent push.
But again, they were able to get the defense to buy in and bite up when it came to those play action passes. So if you buy into it, then you might as well not have to worry about it too much. Again, we'll see a different kind of setup here with Nebraska, I would assume.
Yeah,
a little bit.
And one thing we will see some reinforcements. We were without one of our top 6 linemen. If you notice on the depth chart, at one of the guard spots, it was supposed to be either Jack Wiltie or Landon Beebe. Landon Beebe didn't play. He didn't dress. And then also we'll probably see some more Cavassier smoke this week with Alton McCaskill potentially coming in week 3 against CSU.
And how is that doing for McCaskill? Is it just straight up want to get him right after that injury from last year? Still just needs to get to that place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where if you watch the well-off videos pretty closely, you haven't seen him outside of a gold jersey, which the gold jersey is absolutely do not touch him, do not bring him to the ground. He's been campaigning, if you want to use a good word, in order to get that jersey off. But as Coach Prime has said numerous times, we're not going to take that off until he's ready.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And this was a fun game. I mean, for me, what really was my question to you is, this was a very close game at half. What do you think kind of was said at halftime to kind of spur each team and what led them into certain directions? Because it felt like CU came out very hot and ready to go, where TCU kind of felt a little bit more timid and was worried about kind of the atmosphere and what was going on there.
Yeah, I think you could kind of tell that the TCU players were in a little bit of shock. It's hard not to when you're facing a team that you did face last year and they were 1-11. Yeah, sure, they could have brought in a whole new crop of players, but I think you could see some genuine shock on them. And then the message, again, from Coach Sanders, you look at the halftime, it's just, we're not losing this game. And it's almost like a will thing at this point. And we can kind of talk about it with the upcoming game against Nebraska, but you see in his videos, there was one from well off today where they're practicing in Folsom Field. And the message is you just don't let someone come into your house and beat you. Or, the quote last week was, we're not losing this game. We're winning this game. We believe in us. It doesn't matter what the other team does. Were you able to see a lot of that stuff, Rick? Were you able to see some of the game there out at Air Force? Or
I trust me, I've watched that game twice, so I didn't get it. I just got updates as I was on the field. But, man, the emotional outpouring after that game when, Coach Prime walks in there and he slams down his book and he goes, do you believe now? And he specifically pointed out some individuals in the press. And he said, well, what about we can't do this? What about we can't do that? What about this player? He's not acclimated yet. What about that stuff? I thought that was next level. You don't see that very often, and those coaches have a huge effect on their players.
Yeah, and I think we could all agree that he's preaching a belief in his players that a team or a player can resound to in order to play at almost even the level they didn't know they could. It's that pushing of belief that, hey, we believe in us. We're going to do this together. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, and for me, looking forward to Nebraska just a little bit. What are your thoughts on kind of their 3-3-5 defense versus the Buffs? I feel like that's a defense that, if the Buffs are patient enough, they can take pretty good advantage of that. Just again, it's a defense that it just feels like they're not getting pressure, at least from what I saw from Nebraska. They had very little pressure coming up front. And with that kind of time with Colorado we saw last week, I think they're going to be kind of a stalemate, and he's going to have plenty of time for Sanders. So what are your thoughts on the 3-3-5? And does Nebraska have to become very more aggressive and start sending those interior pass rushers like they did at the end of the game last week?
Yeah, I think they're almost going to have to sell out to stop the pass, this week. They're going to be out without one of their best defensive linemen, too, for the first half of this week's game because I believe his name's Ty Robinson. was called for targeting in the second half of the Minnesota game. So they'll be without one of their starters, one of their better defensive linemen. And pretty much across the board, what you've seen from like a Joel Klatt, other people that are breaking down the game, they don't have the DBs that even TCU does. So when you see stuff like that, I mean, you definitely see where the passing offense could have another big day. You know, especially if they get the ball rolling early, they could put up points in the first quarter and make Nebraska a passing team. You know, Jeff Sims is a quarterback that I think has 26 career interceptions in his 3 years of playing football. So he's definitely a guy that'll throw the ball into rough situations. You know, you're going to be able to get some turnovers off this guy. I don't think you're going to if he's running. You're definitely going to be able to if he's passing. So this could be one of those games where CU could definitely light up the scoreboard again, but I think they have to do it early in order to really hold down that Nebraska defense. Because I think they might honestly, Rick, I mean, you might see an Air Force style attack out of that running offense. You might see them try to run the ball 50 times to not only slow down the clock, but to also keep that offense off the field. What do you think about that?
I'm looking forward to it, definitely. I'm especially looking forward to that renewed rivalry, huh?
I don't think it ever left. Yes. But again, it's one of those things that I feel very similar to when you see Sims passing. He's not able to get his footwork set even when he has time. So again, that's where I would love to get the Buffs being able to force passing situation, forcing those long third downs where they have to make a play, because again, Sims does just not have the technical set work to work with right now to be able to pass the ball down the field and be effective.
Well, you even look like some of their outside targets, they're probably their best receiving option went down with a torn ACL in that Minnesota game. So they really don't have the weapons outside. They do have good running backs, and they have running backs that are over 200 pounds, along with a quarterback in Jeff Sims that is a big dude. You know, I really look for them to try and lean on the run game. So this is really going to test that front that, if we're being honest, did struggle against TCU. You know, you allowed almost, 7 yards a carry to that TCU offense last week. And, there were some big plays that, Travis Henry was able to chase down to prevent a touchdown. But those kind of things really need to be wrapped up. And if we can hold down that rushing offense to a more manageable yardage, because they're going to get yards, but you just got to hold that offense down. Then again, we could see that big game out of CU in Folsom this week.
Okay. You guys feel like we have everything we need to know for Colorado, at least for the basics. You guys ready to move on to some Air Force football?
Let's do it.
Let's do it, guys.
Man, I'm still want to talk about CU.
You still do? I mean, hey, if you have something to say, this is the time before we get into Air Force. Let us know.
We can definitely go back to it. I don't know, John, if you heard Tony's mic on my end was cutting in and out a little bit. I didn't know if I was having a stroke or maybe I was just too excited about the Buffs actually winning this.
Palpitations going on, something like that a little bit. Yeah, each time you just couldn't handle it.
Man, this is a good time to be a Colorado sports fan, and we'll talk to John next about CSU, but they still, everything's still in front of them. They're going to have the growing pains that both of our clubs may experience as well. So we played Bobby Moe.
How was it a basketball kind of score? What was going on with them? Did they bring in some of those athletes?
Man, I tell you. So last week I profiled Anthony Chickett, their backup quarterback, kid that had overcome Hodgkin's lymphoma and was on the roster. Now, when I profiled him, I didn't think that he would see the field much because he was the backup. Well, in the second series, the starter tore his MCL, and Anthony came in and had a very efficient game. I think he only missed on 3 passes. It was something like 16 of 19. But, of course, we shut them down. We did what you're supposed to do to Robert Morris, and we beat them 42-7. My prediction was 49-6. So there you go. We saw some stuff last week that was encouraging. We saw some stuff that was discouraging. So the encouraging stuff was some of our young players did get to play, as you would imagine, and they did well. We got our first start ever from Zach Larrier, the 2-time 200-meter Mountain West champion. He did very well. He threw for 95 yards, 2 for 3 exactly. He threw a touchdown pass to Jared Rosnos, a new face in the Air Force receiving corps. So, and then he rushed for 95 yards. So very efficient, half and maybe a couple minutes from Zach. Friend of mine and friend of the program, John Lee Eldridge III, was unhappy to say the least. He did make the most of his 4 carries, broke off a 65-yarder, and finished with 73 yards rushing. Defense looked solid. We did have one loss defensively, and we will fill that the rest of the season. Our spur that we talked about, Camby Goff, ruptured his Achilles tendon. Not a pleasant injury. Talked to Camby via phone yesterday. Surgery went well. He did assure me that he will play again. It won't be this season, unfortunately, but he will come back to the Air Force Academy and play next season. So we'll, of course, be talking about him in the future. You guys got any questions about Robert Morris?
Well, I had it on one of the other TVs as I'm watching CU. So, I saw it looked like a very Air Force performance. Definitely running the ball efficiently, leaning on that running game, and just not putting the ball in harm's way as you normally would. I did see one where I'm like, that's a little un-Air Force-like. I think it was the jump attempt at the pitch. Do you recall that one? I think that was one I'm like, oh, that's probably going to get smoothed out against other teams. We don't want the guy jumping when he tries to pitch the ball. But it looked, very Air Force. It looked like the game you should play, running the ball down the throat and just running the ball efficiently on this every play.
Yeah, I saw that play, and I think that's just about getting the kinks worked out, right?
Of course. Yeah.
So when Zach Larrier was in there, we were sideline to sideline, and then a couple counters and traps, and we had some success. And then when he left, Jensen Jones came in, and Jensen ran up the middle like 5 times and scored a touchdown. I think they literally did a Rudy on him and carried him in the end zone for his touchdown. So, yeah, I was really encouraged and even more encouraged with the fact that now it's time to play some football.
Now, do you think that this week was in some sense where you had some of these, like you said, John Lee Eldridge, where he just didn't get the snaps because they were too afraid of having an injury, that kind of thing? Was that going on for the Falcons in some sense?
Well, yes. And if that's the case, if you're concerned about your superstar offensive player maybe getting banged up in the first game of the year, I understand that. Then, on the other hand, your superstar spur and or hybrid safety, you play him up to a 35-0 lead, and then on a non-contact, his Achilles goes. I have trouble with the consistency, but of course we are the Monday and or Sunday morning quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think that's really one thing that you can never really factor when an injury is going to happen. I think if we want to draw a parallel to another sport, you look at a guy like a Jamal Murray when he tears his ACL. Some people would argue the game's out of hand. Some people argue you can still get back into this. I don't think you can really ever factor in when an injury is going to happen, and it's just unfortunate that it did.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you got one guy already out there, at least have some internal consistency when you're talking to your players. Just to get that kind of, just to have it be equal, to understand why certain players were picked that certain way, to get some young guys in, to get to do that mix a certain way. Because if there's not that internal consistency, players are going to be left with asking questions. Why was I kept in here? Am I not as valued as much as this player? Those kind of things that just don't need to come up in week one, essentially, were my thoughts.
No, I agree with you. And that's just one of those things that happens when you're playing a different caliber of opponent early. So I'm not too concerned about it. My concern, of course, now is going forward, how we're going to adapt. We've got a couple players. What I'm expecting, and it has not been confirmed yet, but I am around this team quite a bit. I would expect Jaden Goodwin, who's a bigger body type like Camby, to slide over there to Spur, and then a Jalen Murgison, a CJ Boyd to go in, and they've got some snaps, so they're not inexperienced by any means, and we'll see. They have indeed touched down in Houston, is what I've been told.
Yes, they did touch down in Houston. I saw some pictures of some of your guys getting off the plane, even so. Trey Taylor, some of those guys, to see them come off, it's always nice to see, and I'm very excited for that. I think that they're going. Let's talk a little bit ahead then to Sam Houston State. What are your thoughts initially going into this game? Is this a game that you kind of anticipate to be difficult for Air Force?
Well, I do, and first and foremost, the thing I noticed when I started to scout Sam Houston State was they are the Bearcats with a K, and I don't know why, but I'm sure they
got that extra, some edge to them, something like that. Would you say, is that what you mean to it?
Yeah, their colors and some of their schemes remind me a little bit of the Clemson Tigers. So, whatever they're happy with, they are the 2021 FCS national champions. This team went ahead and redshirted 60% of that championship roster. They returned, and their first game at the next level was against the BYU Cougars in Provo, a tough place to play. Typically, BYU has a great offense, and they were able to score just 14 points. On the other side of the ball, however, the Bearcats with the K only managed 185 yards of total offense. So what I'm seeing going into the matchup tomorrow is, hey, we're going to have to be better on offense, and also we're going to have to continue to play Falcon defense. So we'll see how that goes. I think it's going to be close.
So you're taking the plus 13.5 for Sam Houston State. Is that what you're saying?
You know what? Yeah, I probably am.
Yeah, I was a little surprised actually when I saw that line. Air Force is definitely has been a dominant team for a while. Averaging around 10 wins a season for the last couple seasons. But to play against that FCS champion and to still be almost a 2-touchdown favorite, it's interesting.
One of the things that jumped out to me during scouting this team is, same thing CU found out last year. It's hard to prepare 1 week for a team that runs the triple option. And I looked at the history of opponents in the recent couple years, and we had a former star player by the name of Blaine Morgan. He was one of our quarterbacks. He became head coach at Lamar, which was in the WAC, and they played Sam Houston State twice a year. So Sam Houston State, for the last 4 years, twice a year, saw the triple option, and they shut down the triple option without exception. I think the highest that Lamar scored was 19 points in one game. So they are a good sideline to sideline defense, and they're going to be a huge challenge.
It sounds like they're very disciplined in what they do on both sides of the ball. They're very disciplined, and that's kind of what Air Force does. So this is going to be kind of one of those battles where who's going to make that kind of first mistake. Would you agree with that in some sense, or is it going to be just a grinded out full match?
No, I absolutely agree with what you're saying, and I think you gotta look at two factors. First of all, players that did not play last week that will play this week. We're talking Peyton Zadroik, our first team preseason All Mountain West nose guard. We're talking Brandon Ingle, our receiver. We're talking about our star tight end Caleb Rios. You know, we got some guys coming back that are going to make a difference. And the second factor, and I think this is the one that really excites me, we are playing an NRG, right? We are playing where the Houston Texans play. This is big-time exposure for the Falcons, who we do play some pretty big games, but especially for the home team in this case, the Bearcats with a K.
You know, and to your point a little bit earlier, this has to be kind of strong for recruiting if they are able to, you know, bring some recruits in and have them stay on the sideline with Air Force. I know they've done most of their 2024 class, but man, if they're able to get a few guys on there to see that, and that would be huge as well. Just those small little differences to get over the hump. Same thing with CU when they're going to have the Nebraska. That's going to be huge for CU. They are really planning on that to be a strong way to recruit.
Yeah, and I think both of your clubs as well as Air Force, huge recruiting in Texas, not just because of the size, but the athletes are incredible.
Yeah, it's a hub for, at least for, I know for CU, for CSU, I believe it's pretty much a hub. How can you not have it be a hub for one of your players? I mean, it feels like to me, you got to choose between one of the three of California, Texas, or Florida to be somewhere where you get a good number of your players that are kind of hidden gems that are 2 stars that just get lost because it's such a good state.
Yes,
well, just kind of. Oh, I'm sorry, Rick, but just kind of speaking to that, they had said that might be a contributing factor to CU wanting to make that move back to the Big 12, is getting that footprint in Texas again. You know, that's a conference where you're going to be playing 4 or 5 teams from Texas every year instead of never.
And then you get your parents being able to go. When it was California, I mean, don't get me wrong, we had a lot of kids be able to go for away games, but might as well, you know, it was still a trek to get into Colorado where this won't be as much of an issue. So same with kind of Air Force. It's very much in the Mountain West, in that range where they're able to keep kind of their guys. So very excited about that for them.
Yeah, definitely. And then when we do the score predictions, I'll let you know how close I think it's going to be. But I'd like to see where do you go from here, John?
Yeah, let's kind of make our transition then. It is time to talk to some CSU football. Cam the Ram had a rough one, in my opinion. I think everyone felt it. It was a tough game against Washington State. For me, you know, starting off, it felt like, even so, let's get to the recap of the end of the game. It was 50-24. You know, when it came to the first half, it felt a little bit closer in terms of the score, but the play just did not feel close at all. There was a lot of issues when it came to containing Cameron Ward, who we spoke a lot about from Washington State. He really kind of did it all. Was able to run the ball. I think was able to get a touchdown, almost 50 yards rushing along that line. He also threw for 450 yards, 3 touchdowns. They just really had no issue when it came to moving the ball for Washington State. Really the only times that they kind of had mistakes were their own internal issues, where maybe, hey, they went forward on fourth down in the red zone or something along those lines and just weren't able to convert an extra maybe 6 points in easy field goal attempts. But for me, Washington State came out and really dominated. When it comes to total yards, I think this wasn't the Fort Rate offense that we were kind of expecting from CSU. I do think that has some part to do with Matt Mummy. He's kind of has a heavy heart on him with Mike Leach being gone. This was the first game without him kind of being someone as a leader where he looked toward, and his father also worked with Mike Leach. So I think that was something that was on his mind at least, and on the CSU's mind. But as we were talking about earlier, kind of before the game, Tony, it really came down to the offensive line and defensive line. It felt like when it came for CSU, they actually did a lot better. They had only allowed 1 sack compared to 7 last year. But at the end of the day, their quarterbacks just did not feel comfortable. And when it came to the defensive side, they were only able to achieve 2 sacks themselves. So I just did not see much out of CSU beyond just some gut plays. Other than that, it really felt like they just were not prepared for this.
Yeah, and you could see even from what I watched of the first and second halves, you could see that though they eliminated the sacks, they were still getting a pretty good push up front. You saw a lot of balls being knocked down. So Lane Millen would throw, hand be right up in his face, knock the ball down. There were a ton of balls that were batted down.
Right.
And you could even look, you look at the offensive drive summaries, that first drive, everything was great. 12
right.
plays,
that was their
yards.
Yeah, that was where they made 4 first downs. I think they only had a total of 5 maybe in the first half. So it all came literally in the first drive. And that's just something you can't have. I mean, believe me, it looked great. Like you were saying, things were looking good, but they just couldn't get going when it came to third down efficiency. They weren't making plays until the later half of the second half, where Washington State was kind of playing off and letting them take those first downs and have the clock go down. So that was a big issue, I felt, for them as well.
Yeah, and I mean, your defense is going to get worn down if you do something like that. You see, like I said, the field goal drive, and then you see 3 and out, 4 downs, you're out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, interception, downs, interception. I mean, that's how those next offensive progressions went into the third quarter. So, your defense, if your offense is only out there for a minute and a half, that defense isn't going to have any time to get rest. And I mean, you could just see it building up. Those lanes started to open up. Cam Ward was breaking contain, and there were a bunch of easy passing catches to be had in that secondary.
Yeah, and honestly, again, coming to that offensive line for the Rams, they just could not get it going when it came to running. When they have 37 yards rushing, again, minus some of those running quarterback plays that were taken back a little bit, but it just could not get going. None of the guys were over 3 yards per carry. When they ever did have a chance for a little bit of a break, there was holding penalties. Penalties kind of held them back. Some were declined, but it's not like they had a ton of penalties either. 4 penalties, 40 yards. So those, I assume, basically 4 holdings. But in the end, you can't win a game when the other team has 40 minutes of time of possession versus your 20. Like you're saying, these were 4 and outs, 3 and outs. No matter what they tried, these were going very quickly, these plays. They were coming in and out. And by the time, I think their punter was into the double digits when punting. And on top of that, they were asking him to kind of directional punt and do it in a way where I felt it was a little bit harder for Patty just to get that average, to flip the field. So that was an issue for CSU. Really, the bright spot I see for CSU right now is they have this week off. They can focus, at least in my opinion, they should focus on doing what they need to do right. Focus on their offense, focus on what Matt Mummy has to offer, those kind of things before game planning for CU. See what CU has to offer against a similar kind of defense, 3-3-5. That's what I want to see out of CSU more, instead of going right into this, hey, let's get ready for CU. Let's first make sure that you can get, get some of these bigger, get some passes going off besides a 75-yard touchdown pass, or, besides their 2 scores, touchdown scores, I believe, came from special teams and 1 75-yard pass. You can't have that happen be your only way to make points. And I thought they were very lucky to cross the 20-yard barrier, 20 point barrier kind of thing. So they didn't take advantage of Horton as a receiver. I think he's the best receiver that in the Mountain West, at least my opinion. And when you can't get him open, I mean, that is your star. So I didn't see much chance beyond that.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, that's just one of those things where you don't see the explosive play. He has 9 catches, but it's only going for 81 yards.
Yeah.
You got to be getting those chunk plays out of a dominant wide receiver like that. What were you going to say, Rick?
Definitely. Hey, when you mentioned Matt Mummy, and I'd like to say friend of the program, as a matter of fact, as of today.
Yes.
So that's great. Do you think that going forward that they really need to maybe refine or maybe redirect Clay Millen? Because he looked more uncomfortable in game 1 than I saw at any point last year. And I'm not sure if he's not familiar with the personnel or if he's just they were doing too much on defense.
Yeah, for me, again, I felt the very similar kind of thing going on. He didn't look comfortable. He wasn't stepping up into the pocket. He kind of felt like he was leaning backwards, a little bit nervous about pressure. Yes, there's new players there at CSU. They have a new tight end that they're leaning on to be strong. Besides Horton, really, and Ross Simmons, those are the consistent weapons that he knows from the years previously. And again, they're being covered with, someone underneath, kind of shadowing them and over the top. So those players are being taken out early, and the other options just don't seem to be breaking through in terms of, hey, I have some separation here. So for me, it feels like Clay Millen he's looking towards his 2 guys that he's comfortable with. And from there, he kind of panics. That's what I'm taking it as right now. And that's where you need more timing with some of these other guys, because it's just not going to work when you have a good tight end who came over. You got to take advantage of him, especially since we saw some good things from when Clay Millen came out of the game. We did see some good things from the backup Nicholas, who, again, Brandon Flower Nicolosi, he was able to push the ball down the field, at least, double what Clay Millen was in yards, and again, able to get some touchdowns on board. But again, how can you get this team really going something comfortable when your leading rusher, has 11 carries, 29 yards, 2.6 yards per carry? Is there any threat really of the run game at this point for CSU? I don't think so.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things too, where, when you're forced to be a passing team like that, we kind of referenced that in trying to force Nebraska to be that for this next week. But when you're only getting 1.9 yards to carry, you kind of get those happy feet as a quarterback, because every time you drop back that defense is not even.
They're not concerned. They're
just
going for. They think this is their chance to get their sacks and get their opportunities, and that's something that it's going to be uncomfortable for a quarterback when you don't have a chip, anything to give you just a 1 second to breathe.
Right, exactly, and that's when you start to see a quarterback drifting back in the pocket, trying to throw off his back foot. That's when you start to see a lot of those balls getting knocked down at the line of scrimmage, because he's not stepping up, planting, and letting it rip. When you're floating or moving in the pocket too much, that's when a lot of those bad plays can happen, where you're either getting hit or thrown into the hands of the defensive lineman.
And when Clay Millen tried to step up, unfortunately, each time there was interior pass rush, and one of the times, that's the reason why he was out of the game, because he hurt his arm. And that tends to be a trend with Clay Millen at this point, is he's trying to do some hero ball, and by doing so, you're putting yourself at risk. And I think that's going to be something that the Rams have to make sure they stop him from doing.
Definitely. Well, we know one thing for sure is, but even between the 3 of us, you can count this one as being undefeated this week.
Yeah.
That is true. They get a bye week.
We do.
Bye weeks are undefeated.
Yes, and I think it's well needed. Unfortunately for the timing, worried a little bit about CU coming on, but like I said, would you focus on just your own offense, or would you start game planning for CU?
I think they've probably done a lot of reflecting here this first week. You gotta clean up the mistakes. That's first and foremost. You can't start looking at a team or an offense like CU until you clean up the issues that you had against Washington State. So I would say that game planning probably doesn't start until next week after they get 2 weeks worth of film on CU. I would tend to agree with you that this is probably a lot of self-reflection. What do you think, Rick?
Yeah, definitely. If I was a coach, I would use my poll, which I don't know if they can get in there or not. I would go and watch that game. I would go and see because how often do you get that ability to go and watch next week's opponent play? Go there and see what they're all about. But, that's our ticket to find it, as we know.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, anything else, guys, that you have kind of on your mind as we're pushing up here time-wise? Anything that you think that's important for each university?
No, I think we ought to get into some score predictions.
I wanted to
put ourselves out there.
I'm gonna say one thing real quick. Do you, at least I personally see it as, from week 1 to week 2 or game 1 to game 2, I see any college team, that's when they make their biggest jump. All of a sudden the consistency starts to take place. They got all those jitters out, all those small little things that they're not quite used to, maybe from practice into actual live game. Week 1 into week 2, I see the biggest jump from these teams, and that's what I'm excited to see. Okay, ready for some score predictions?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start with CU.
All right, so I had written earlier this week, and I think in an article that's probably going to come out tomorrow. I won't say the exact score. I'll wait for you guys to go to Colorado Buffalo's Wire in order to see that.
There we go.
But I have us winning by at least 10. I'll say that. I'll let you go for it, Rick, and I'll let our loyal listeners look at Colorado Buffalo for the actual score.
Well, I know what it is because I looked at it, but so first and foremost, before I make the Air Force prediction, I was one of those guys that was like, "Oh, Nebraska by 6.5 points back in August. This looks good."
Thank you.
and then really we had that 10-point swing, right? We're 3.5 point favorites. So I really like that. Doesn't happen very often, but if you get on there early, you can you could get some gems. I think we're gonna have a close game. It's gonna be a 1-score game. I do believe that 1 score will be an 8-point margin, 24-16. Our Fighting Falcons, and I think it's going to work out good because I'm going to get to see CU play, and then I'm going to be there. My flight leaves in a matter of hours, so I will be at NRG Field this time tomorrow night.
Nice.
That's awesome.
And CSU, again, taking the victory. We got it. Yes. But when it comes to the other games, real quickly, Nebraska, I have that one. I have the Buffs winning by, I'm going to go with 10 at least. I think it could be higher. I really do, but it just depends how fast CU comes out. I think that could be an easy 31, 31-21 kind of game.
Okay.
And Air Force, and when it comes to Air Force, Rick, you've made me feel like this is somewhat like a trap game, but at the same time, I feel like Air Force is going to handle their business. I think it's going to be closer with just some things going on with that team. I'm going to go 24-10, and I think they're going to barely get those 10. It's going to be last minute kind of thing. The defense for Air Force is going to do what they do.
Yeah, I like that. I was kind of, as I'm ruminating here, I was thinking 28-14.
Something like that.
So
yeah.
I like that one. Somewhere in that range. I think the run game really ekes the clock. They are able
my
to
CU prediction is 42-24 Buffs.
Ooh, what? That's like, again, we're starting to make hats, putting on scores on these hats. This is going to be huge for marketing, huge for recruiting. I can see that CU would love that.
I love that. That's going to be great.
All right, guys. It feels like we're at the hour mark. Thank you so much for watching CCF. Please reach out to us on our YouTubes, on YouTube, as well as follow us on our Twitter. Again, thank you so much for everything, and I hope you guys have a great week of football. Best of luck.
Go and try your luck. Touch me in again, we let it rain. Please don't start us up. Got that black and white, that yin and yang. Mr. Officer, please don't search us, we don't